Warning! What you're about to witness happened on September 12, 2025, at 11:34 hours Pacific Time. 12 Chinese J-20 Mighty Dragon stealth fighters, armed with 48 PL-15 long-range air-to-air missiles, intercepting 8 American F-35 Lightning II stealth fighters over international waters, 240 miles from any friendly airbase, no backup, no escape routes, and 18 minutes of the most intense stealth versus stealth aerial combat in aviation history that redefined everything military experts thought they knew about fifth-generation fighter warfare. I'm your host at Navy Warfare, where we analyze the most critical aerial engagements that determine air superiority between superpowers. Today's battle will show you exactly what happens when the world's most advanced stealth fighters meet in actual combat, not training exercises, not simulations, but life-or-death aerial warfare where radar invisibility becomes useless and pilots must rely on split-second reflexes and superior tactics to survive. And if you think stealth technology makes modern air combat predictable, this story will prove that when stealth meets stealth, the advantage goes to whoever shoots first. September 12, 2025. International airspace over the Philippine Sea, 180 miles northeast of Luzon Island. 8 American F-35C Lightning II fighters launched from the USS Gerald R. Ford were conducting routine freedom of navigation operations when Chinese early warning radar detected their approach toward disputed territories claimed by Beijing. Within minutes, 12 J-20 Mighty Dragon fighters scrambled from Hainan Island Air Base with orders to intercept and force the American aircraft away from Chinese-claimed airspace. The tactical situation was unprecedented in modern aerial warfare. Both aircraft types represent the pinnacle of stealth fighter technology. The F-35 Lightning II, America's most advanced multi-role stealth fighter, versus the J-20 Mighty Dragon, China's answer to American fifth-generation air superiority. Both aircraft are designed to be nearly invisible to radar, both carry advanced beyond visual range missiles, and both are flown by elite pilots trained specifically for stealth versus stealth combat scenarios. The American F-35C fighters were configured for long-range patrol with internal weapons bays, carrying 4 AIM-120D AMRAAM missiles each, providing 32 advanced air-to-air missiles with 180-kilometer range and active radar guidance. The Chinese J-20 formation carried 4 PL-15 missiles per aircraft internally, plus additional PL-10 short-range missiles, giving the Chinese force 48 long-range missiles and 24 close combat weapons for the engagement. At 11:31 hours, both formations detected each other simultaneously at a range of 85 kilometers, much closer than either side expected due to the stealth characteristics of both aircraft types. Traditional fighter engagements begin with beyond visual range missile exchanges at distances exceeding 150 kilometers. But stealth technology had compressed the engagement envelope to ranges where both sides would have only seconds to react to missile launches. The Chinese formation immediately split into 3-4 aircraft elements, attempting to surround the smaller American formation and force a multi-directional engagement that would overwhelm American defensive systems. The American flight leader countered by ordering his 8 aircraft into a defensive wheel formation that would allow mutual support while maintaining maximum missile engagement flexibility. But here's what made this engagement different from every previous air-to-air combat scenario. Stealth fighters are designed to defeat radar-guided missiles. But when stealth aircraft fight each other, the advantage shifts to whichever side can achieve target lock first and launch missiles before being detected. The battle would be decided by sensor technology, pilot reaction time, and tactical coordination rather than aircraft performance or missile range. Now here's a question that every Navy Warfare subscriber needs to consider. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is exactly why these aerial combat scenarios are so critical to understand, because they reveal how stealth technology changes the fundamental dynamics of air warfare. What would you do as the outnumbered American flight leader? Attempt to disengage and avoid combat, or press the attack and use superior pilot training to overcome numerical disadvantage? Drop your tactical assessment in the comments below. At 11:33 hours, the Chinese lead element achieved target lock on 2 American F-35s and launched 4 PL-15 missiles simultaneously. The missiles, each carrying a 38-kilogram warhead and capable of Mach 4 speed, were guided by active radar seekers designed specifically to defeat stealth aircraft signatures. The American pilots had less than 90 seconds to detect the incoming missiles and execute defensive maneuvers before impact. The targeted F-35s immediately began electronic countermeasures while executing high-G evasive maneuvers designed to break missile target lock. However, the advanced Chinese missiles maintained guidance despite American defensive measures, forcing both F-35s to deploy chaff and flares while diving toward the ocean surface to use ground clutter for radar concealment. Simultaneously, the American formation launched 8 AIM-120D missiles at the Chinese aircraft that had revealed their positions by firing first. The American missiles, significantly more advanced than their Chinese counterparts, used sophisticated algorithms to maintain target lock on stealth aircraft while coordinating attack patterns to prevent mutual interference between weapons. The aerial battlefield became a three-dimensional maze of supersonic missiles, radar jamming, and violent aircraft maneuvering as 20 stealth fighters engaged in combat at speeds exceeding 1,200 kilometers per hour, while trying to maintain stealth characteristics that would prevent enemy targeting. Pilots reported G-forces approaching the limits of human endurance while simultaneously managing weapons systems and defensive countermeasures. At 11:34 hours, the first aircraft was lost when a Chinese PL-15 missile struck an American F-35 that had been unable to break target lock despite aggressive maneuvering. The stealth fighter exploded in a fireball visible for miles, while the pilot ejected successfully, but was now floating in the Philippine Sea with Chinese and American aircraft still engaged in aerial combat overhead. For those following Navy warfare's analysis of modern air combat, this moment represents the first confirmed stealth fighter shootdown in actual warfare. The loss demonstrated that advanced stealth technology cannot provide complete protection against weapons specifically designed to engage low observable aircraft, especially when engagement ranges are compressed by mutual stealth capabilities. 2 Chinese J-20s were destroyed within 30 seconds of the American loss, when AIM-120D missiles successfully penetrated their defensive countermeasures. The American missiles demonstrated superior guidance algorithms and warhead effectiveness, completely destroying both Chinese aircraft, despite their stealth characteristics and electronic warfare systems. The Chinese pilots did not survive the impacts. The engagement rapidly evolved into close-quarters aerial combat as the surviving aircraft closed to visual range, where stealth advantages become irrelevant and pilot skill becomes the determining factor in survival. 7 American F-35s faced 10 Chinese J-20s in traditional dogfighting scenarios that pilots train for but rarely experience in actual combat conditions. At 11:36 hours, the battle entered its most intense phase as aircraft from both sides began engaging with short-range missiles and even cannon fire at ranges where pilots could see each other through cockpit canopies. The Chinese J-20s demonstrated superior maneuverability due to their larger size and more powerful engines, while the American F-35s showed better situational awareness and pilot-machine interface technology. The aerial combat became a deadly ballet of supersonic aircraft maneuvering in 3 dimensions, while firing missiles and cannon rounds at targets often less than 2 kilometers away. Pilots reported that the engagement felt more like a violent video game than traditional air combat, with aircraft appearing and disappearing in seconds, while missiles and tracer rounds filled the sky in every direction. A Chinese J-20 achieved a close-range missile lock on an American F-35 and fired a PL-10 infrared-guided missile from less than 5 kilometers away. However, the American pilot executed a defensive maneuver called a barrel roll break that caused the Chinese missile to lose target acquisition, while simultaneously positioning the F-35 for a cannon attack on the J-20 that had just fired. The American F-35's 25mm GAU-22 cannon fired 180 rounds in a 3-second burst that struck the Chinese aircraft in the engine compartment, causing catastrophic damage that forced the Chinese pilot to eject immediately. The J-20 crashed into the ocean while its pilot descended by parachute into the same waters where combat was still raging overhead. At 11:38 hours, the numerical advantage began to tell as multiple Chinese aircraft coordinated attacks against individual American fighters. 2 J-20s bracketed a single F-35, with one aircraft attacking from above, while the second engaged from below, a tactic that prevented the American pilot from effectively maneuvering against both threats simultaneously. The trapped F-35 pilot attempted to break the bracket by executing a vertical climb at maximum afterburner, but the Chinese aircraft had anticipated this maneuver and positioned themselves to maintain targeting advantage regardless of American defensive tactics. The J-20s fired simultaneous PL-10 missiles that struck the American aircraft from two different angles, destroying the F-35 instantly. If you're interested in understanding how pilot training and aircraft capabilities interact during actual aerial combat, make sure you're subscribed to Navy Warfare with notifications enabled. And here's a tactical question for our air combat community. Given what you now know about stealth versus stealth engagements, do you think numerical superiority or superior pilot training is more important when stealth advantages are eliminated? Your assessment could help other viewers understand the evolution of modern air warfare tactics. The remaining 6 American F-35s found themselves facing 8 Chinese J-20s in an aerial combat environment where traditional beyond visual range advantages had been eliminated by mutual stealth capabilities. The American pilots coordinated their defensive tactics to maintain mutual support while looking for opportunities to exploit Chinese tactical errors. At 11:40 hours, the American formation executed a coordinated attack that demonstrated superior tactical training and aircraft coordination. 4 F-35s engaged the Chinese aircraft with missiles, while 2 additional F-35s maneuvered to attack positions that would prevent Chinese escape or regrouping. The American pilots had recognized that their aircraft's superior sensor fusion and data sharing capabilities provided tactical advantages that could overcome numerical disadvantage. The coordinated American attack destroyed 3 Chinese J-20s in less than 45 seconds, with AIM-120D missiles striking targets that were simultaneously engaged by multiple American aircraft. The Chinese formation began to break apart as individual pilots attempted to disengage rather than continuing the engagement against increasingly coordinated American tactics. However, the 5 surviving Chinese J-20s regrouped and executed their own coordinated attack, using their superior speed and climbing performance to gain altitude advantage over the American formation. The Chinese pilots had realized that their aircraft's better high-altitude performance could provide tactical advantages if they could force the engagement above 15,000 meters, where the F-35s would be at a disadvantage. The aerial battlefield shifted vertically as Chinese aircraft climbed to maximum operational altitude, while American F-35s attempted to maintain engagement geometry that would allow effective weapons employment. The Chinese strategy was to use altitude advantage to launch missiles from above, while remaining outside the engagement envelope of American weapons. At 11:42 hours, the high-altitude engagement resulted in missile exchanges at extreme range and altitude, where both aircraft types were operating at the edge of their performance envelopes. The thin air at high altitude affected missile performance and aircraft maneuverability, creating combat conditions that neither side's pilots had experienced in training scenarios. 2 Chinese J-20s were destroyed by American missiles during the high-altitude engagement, but the remaining 3 Chinese aircraft managed to score hits on 2 American F-35s. 1 American aircraft was damaged but remained operational, while the second was destroyed when multiple Chinese missiles overwhelmed its defensive systems. The surviving aircraft, 5 American F-35s and 3 Chinese J-20s, found themselves in a tactical stalemate where both sides had expended most of their long-range missiles and were forced to rely on short-range weapons and cannon for the final phase of the engagement. The battle had evolved from beyond visual range stealth warfare to close-quarters dogfighting in less than 10 minutes. At 11:44 hours, the final phase of the engagement began as the remaining aircraft closed to visual range, where stealth technology becomes irrelevant and pilot skill determines survival. The American pilots had maintained better tactical coordination throughout the engagement, while the Chinese pilots demonstrated superior aircraft performance at high altitude and speed. The close-range aerial combat became intensely personal, as pilots could see each other through cockpit canopies while maneuvering for weapon engagement opportunities. Radio transmissions indicated that pilots on both sides were experiencing extreme physical and psychological stress from the sustained high-G maneuvering required for survival in close-quarters jet fighter combat. An American F-35 achieved cannon firing position on a Chinese J-20, and fired a sustained burst that damaged the Chinese aircraft's flight control systems. However, the damaged J-20 managed to complete a defensive turn that positioned it for a missile shot at the American fighter. The Chinese pilot fired his last PL-10 missile at point-blank range, destroying the F-35 before his own aircraft became uncontrollable and crashed into the ocean. At 11:46 hours, the final two aircraft, one American F-35 and one Chinese J-20, found themselves in a classic 1 versus 1 dogfight scenario that aviation enthusiasts dream about but rarely occurs in actual combat. Both pilots had expended all long-range missiles and were down to short-range weapons and cannon ammunition for the final engagement. The one-on-one combat lasted nearly 3 minutes, as both pilots demonstrated exceptional skill while maneuvering their aircraft through violent defensive and offensive maneuvers. The F-35 pilot attempted to use superior sensor systems and helmet-mounted display technology to gain targeting advantage, while the J-20 pilot relied on superior aircraft performance and aggressive maneuvering to prevent American weapon engagement. The final engagement ended when the American F-35 pilot managed to achieve a brief cannon firing opportunity during a high-speed vertical maneuver. The 25mm round struck the Chinese aircraft in the cockpit area, killing the pilot instantly and sending the J-20 into an uncontrolled dive that ended when the aircraft impacted the ocean surface at high speed. The Battle of the Philippine Sea ended with 4 surviving American F-35s and 0 operational Chinese J-20s, but at a cost that shocked military planners on both sides. The Americans had lost 4 of their most advanced stealth fighters, along with 3 highly trained pilots, while the Chinese had lost their entire 12-aircraft formation, with all pilots killed or captured. The tactical analysis of the engagement provided unprecedented data about stealth versus stealth aerial combat that military experts had theorized about, but never observed in actual warfare. The battle demonstrated that when stealth aircraft engage each other, traditional beyond visual range advantages are eliminated, and combat outcomes depend on pilot training, aircraft performance, and tactical coordination rather than stealth technology. The intelligence value of the engagement was staggering. Both air forces had tested their most advanced aircraft and weapons systems under actual combat conditions, revealing capabilities and limitations that could only be observed during life-or-death aerial combat. The Americans had demonstrated superior pilot training and tactical coordination, while the Chinese had shown impressive aircraft performance and pilot courage. The casualty analysis was devastating for both sides. 11 Chinese pilots were killed during the engagement, while 3 American pilots were lost, with 1 additional pilot rescued after ejecting over the ocean. The human cost represented the loss of some of the most highly trained and experienced aviators in both air forces, personnel who had required years of training and millions of dollars in investment to develop their skills. The psychological impact on surviving pilots was profound and unprecedented. The engagement had lasted longer and been more intense than any aerial combat in modern aviation history. Pilots reported stress levels that exceeded anything in their training experience, with some experiencing symptoms of combat trauma that required extensive psychological support and rehabilitation. The strategic implications extended far beyond the immediate tactical engagement. The battle had demonstrated that American pilot training and aircraft systems provided decisive advantages in stealth versus stealth combat, but also revealed that Chinese aircraft performance and weapons technology were much more capable than American intelligence had estimated. The international reaction was immediate and alarmed. 20 stealth fighters had engaged in aerial combat over international waters during what both sides initially described as routine operations. The scale and intensity of the engagement indicated preparation for broader conflict that could escalate beyond regional containment if diplomatic solutions were not implemented immediately. The technological lessons learned from the engagement influenced aircraft development and pilot training programs for multiple air forces worldwide. The battle had proven that stealth technology alone cannot guarantee air superiority when facing opponents with comparable stealth capabilities and advanced weapons systems. The economic implications were staggering. 20 of the world's most expensive military aircraft had been engaged in combat, with 16 destroyed completely. The financial loss exceeded $2 billion in aircraft alone, not including the cost of pilot training, weapons expended, and search and rescue operations for downed aircrew. The environmental impact created additional complications. 16 destroyed aircraft had created debris fields across hundreds of square miles of ocean, while undetonated missiles and aircraft fuel created contamination concerns for marine ecosystems. Cleanup operations required months of coordinated international effort. The crew rotation and training implications were immediate and expensive. Both air forces recognized that their pilot training programs were inadequate for the realities of stealth versus stealth aerial combat. New training protocols were implemented that emphasized close-quarters maneuvering and situational awareness rather than traditional beyond visual range engagement tactics. The weapons procurement programs were accelerated following the engagement. Both air forces initiated crash programs to develop new missiles and defensive systems specifically designed for stealth versus stealth combat scenarios. The battle had revealed that existing weapon systems were only marginally effective against comparable stealth aircraft. The intelligence sharing between Allied air forces increased dramatically following the engagement. American allies received detailed briefings about Chinese aircraft capabilities and tactics observed during the battle, while Chinese allies were provided with information about American pilot performance and aircraft limitations revealed during the combat. The diplomatic consequences continued for months following the engagement. Both governments initially attempted to minimize the significance of the aerial battle, but survivor testimony and wreckage recovery made concealment impossible. The incident became a focal point for international discussions about aerial warfare rules of engagement and conflict de-escalation procedures. The memorial services for the pilots killed in the engagement drew international attention to the human cost of aerial warfare when diplomatic solutions fail. The average age of fighter pilots is under 35, meaning that young aviators with decades of potential service had been lost during an engagement that lasted less than 20 minutes, but will influence aerial warfare doctrine for generations. The ongoing analysis of wreckage and combat data continues to provide air forces with detailed information about aircraft performance, weapons effectiveness, and pilot decision-making under extreme combat stress. The engagement essentially provided a live fire test of stealth fighter capabilities under the most challenging possible conditions. Before we close, let me ask our Navy warfare community, what other aerial combat scenarios would you like us to analyze? Are you interested in surface-to-air missile engagements against stealth aircraft, electronic warfare tactics in modern air combat, or maybe some of the classified fighter aircraft programs that have been recently revealed? Drop your suggestions in the comments and let us know what aspects of aerial warfare you want to understand better. The training modifications implemented by both air forces emphasized preparation for close-quarters aerial combat, where traditional stealth advantages are eliminated. Simulator programs were updated to include scenarios based directly on the Philippine Sea engagement, ensuring that future fighter pilots would be prepared for the reality of stealth versus stealth air combat. And remember, while this scenario is based on realistic aircraft capabilities, missile specifications, and aerial combat procedures, it represents a simulation of how such engagements might unfold based on actual aircraft performance characteristics and fighter pilot tactical doctrine. The men and women who fly these advanced aircraft deserve our respect and appreciation for the unique dangers they face while operating the most sophisticated weapons platforms ever constructed. That's Navy warfare, bringing you the most detailed analysis of aerial combat and scenarios that shape our world. Subscribe for more in-depth fighter aircraft and air warfare breakdowns. And remember, in the modern aerial combat environment, stealth technology changes everything about air warfare until both sides have stealth capabilities, and then pilot skill and tactical training become the deciding factors in who survives and who doesn't.